Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh live on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube right here at this is the third time I'm saying it. I got to stop with that. Tip of the Ice-Burgh on YouTube. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. It was a rough night last night for the Penguins. They looked exactly as you would expect a team that is vying for one of the top 5 spots in the NHL draft lottery to look when you're going up against a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, the Penguins haven't looked like that in a couple of weeks, but it certainly was a rude awakening whenever they did not show up with their A game at Amalie Arena. We'll talk a little bit about what we saw last night against the Lightning. Then we'll turn the page because, let's face it, the Penguins don't have much that they're playing for. So a game like last night is very much so erase most of it and move forward to the next one. But after we discuss that, we'll get into Sidney Crosby and why it is so important what he is about to do, whether it be on Thursday, whether it be on Sunday, or if somehow, some way it lasts further than that, what he does in the last 5 games of the season. And then we'll close things out with our 3 stars of the week. So let me know in the comment section if you're tuned in live who your 3 stars have been in the last calendar week for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But let's kick things off with what we saw last night. 6-1, Tampa Bay Lightning. Tristan Jarry in net to start. Never really looked comfortable. I'm not going to say all 4 of those goals were on him, but he didn't really look comfortable. You could tell, as we've talked about since he came up, he was very much so not doing the things that he had been doing. He was deep in his crease. He was passive on the play, and it just never looked like he really had his footing, and he didn't look like the Tristan Jarry that we've seen him be over the last couple of weeks. But again, a lot of those goals, it's hard to put blame solely on his shoulders. The first one, I mean, Erik Karlsson had no fight in the net front. He completely got bullied around, and that's why that goal went in. The second one was a redirection off of Rickard Rakell's skate, so you can't really take much out of that one on Tristan Jarry. The third one, he could have saved. Anthony Cirelli's shot, he probably should have saved. He probably wants that one back. And then the fourth one again, the one that got him pulled at the end of the day, it's Erik Karlsson again, losing the net front, losing his man, losing the battle, and it ends up in the back of the Penguins net. It's just a situation in which you show up and you don't have your A game against that type of team. It's what's going to happen. I mean, the Penguins have been on for the last few weeks, but they just simply didn't have it last night. I mean, when you come out without Evgeni Malkin, a late scratch due to an upper body injury, it's already going to be an uphill battle. But you saw as the game wore on that they were shot. There was no chance that they were going to be able to come back after they went down 4-0 in that one. It seemed like all the air was let out of the balloon, and the Penguins were just trying to get to the next one. And that's what it felt like. And that's what we'll do. We'll get to the next one. We're not going to hamper on what we saw last night, but it was just a rough performance all the way around. All 20 people that were on the ice that were dressed for the Penguins. It's a night that all of them were probably going to want to forget. Now, there was one positive takeaway, and that was Sidney Crosby notching an assist. And I'll add to that, it's also Bryan Rust getting a goal, because we talked yesterday about Bryan Rust closing in on the 30-goal mark for the first time in his career. He needed 5 goals in the last 10 games. Nice to see him get one yesterday. Now he needs 4 in the final 9. But more importantly, when it comes to the history of the sport, it's Sidney Crosby. Notches the secondary assist on Bryan Rust's goal, the only goal that the Penguins scored in yesterday's matchup. That is his 79th point of this season. Now he can only max out at 80, which means he is 1 point away from surpassing Wayne Gretzky for the most point-per-game seasons in the history of the NHL. And some of you might be saying, yeah, is that big of a deal? Obviously, in the shadow right now of what Alex Ovechkin is trying to do, which is pass Wayne Gretzky in goals, just in general. Understandably, that's the bigger milestone. But when it comes to Crosby and this one, and point-per-game seasons, this is clearly and obviously the most important milestone that he is going to hit this year, and it's going to be the most important milestone that he hits until he starts cracking top 5s, right? You look at this year alone, and he's hit, off the top of my head, I can think of 5. There's probably more, because it seems like he's been passing milestones night in and night out, but he scored his 600th career goal. That's nothing to sneeze at. He scored his 1600th career point. That's a huge milestone. He got into the top 10 in career assists list. which he's in ninth right now, and passing Steve Yzerman this year is still in play. I believe he needs 5 more assists to pass Steve Yzerman and be in sole possession of ninth in NHL history in career assist. He got into the top 10 in career points this year. Mario Lemieux is next on that list. He probably won't get it this year, but early next year, you can expect that he's going to surpass Mario Lemieux for not just ninth in NHL career points, but surpass him for most career points as a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Speaking of Mario, that's another one that he had, right? He is now first in Penguins history in assists after passing Mario earlier this season. These are all massive milestones. But this next one that he's going to get, whenever he scores his next point, it could be Thursday in Buffalo on the road, or if he doesn't get it on the scoreboard there, it could be at home on Sunday against Ottawa. Talk about storybook. These guys have a knack for doing that. Maybe that's where it happens. But whenever it happens, wherever it happens, this is the biggest milestone that he would have achieved outside of the Stanley Cups, outside of the MVPs. No, not even outside of the MVPs, just outside of the Stanley Cups. This is the biggest milestone that Crosby has ever hit. It is. You surpass Wayne Gretzky in a category like this that just epitomizes Sidney Crosby. Point per game seasons. It epitomizes Crosby's consistency, and it just proves his ability to be dominant over a long period of time. He's about to score 80 points as a 37-year-old. The top scoring season ever as a 37-year-old is Joe Sakic at 100 points. Crosby's going to get close to that. I wouldn't be surprised if he surpasses the 90-point mark, but the fact that he's been able to do this from age 18 to age 38 and probably through to age 39 and 40 is the exact thing that you want to see Sidney Crosby sitting atop the leaderboard for. It's not points. He's not going to catch Gretzky in points. It's not assists. Nobody's catching Gretzky in assists. But to be number one in point per game seasons, to me, I think that is a huge milestone for Sidney Crosby. Not one that he's going to talk overly about, but it's one that I think you look at and you say, there's the Stanley Cups, there's the Olympic gold medals, and then there's this. It's the pantheon for Sidney Crosby. Until he reaches the top 5 in points and the top 5 in assists, which I believe he will do by the end of his career, this is the biggest milestone that he will hit. So hopefully, I mean, I don't want to say hopefully he doesn't score in Buffalo, but it'd be nice to see him be able to do that on home ice. If he does in Buffalo, expect a very, very nice pregame ceremony for Sidney Crosby on Sunday against the Senators. Let's get to our 3 stars of the week. And then as we always do, we will get to every question that you guys have. So if you're tuned in live on Tip of the Ice-Burgh on YouTube, make sure you drop your question in the comment section below. We'll answer as many as we can before we head out of here today. But before we get into that, let's go to the 3 stars of the week. Now, the Penguins haven't been playing bad hockey, but the way I see it now, there is a clear 1 and 2, but somebody in the minors deserves to be the number 3 star. Because the way this guy has played at the AHL level, at the age that he's at, in the position that he's at, is nothing short of astounding. And once you start etching your name in the history books as a, 21-year-old netminder, people start to take attention. People start to pay attention to what you're doing. So the 3rd star of the week this week is Sergei Murashov, AHL goaltender that has dominated the ECHL for the majority of this season, but he's also, in the chances he's been given at the AHL, been extremely good. As of last week, he officially has the longest winning streak in a rookie season in Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins history. It just so happened that 10-game winning streak was the first 10 games of his American Hockey League career. The kid is an animal. The future is very bright between the pipes for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They have Blomqvist, who figures to be a very decent NHL goaltender. They have Philip Larson, who has lit the world on fire in the minors. But this guy, in Sergei Murashov, has quickly become one of the top prospects, not just goaltending prospects, but one of the top prospects the Penguins have seen in almost a decade. He's been great. He's been fantastic. He's 10-0-0 right now at the AHL level, 916 save percentage, 258 goals against average, and 1 shutout. He has been nothing short of spectacular, and he is the 3rd star of the week for the tip of the iceberg. Number 2 star of the week for tip of the iceberg, somebody that has just been a mainstay, and we already talked about him in this episode, and nobody should be surprised that we're talking about him once again. Trucking right along as one of the best in the game at the age of 37, Sidney Crosby is the number 2 star of the week. In 3 games played this week, Crosby has 1 goal, 4 assists, and has extended his point streak to 8 games currently. Not only does he have points in 8 consecutive outings, but he has points in 12 of the last 13 games. He has been on fire since the turn of the calendar to 2025. He has been one of the best all season long at 5-on-5 in the entire NHL, and he continues to put up ridiculous numbers and put up ridiculous performances night in and night out. Even on a night where the Penguins had nothing going for them Tuesday in Tampa Bay, Sidney Crosby made sure that he found the score sheet with a secondary assist late in that outing. So Sidney Crosby is the number 2 star, and the number 1 star, as if there wasn't any doubt. If you paid attention to the Penguins in the past week, you know exactly where I'm going with this one. Number 1 star of the week is Bryan Rust. 3 games played, 4 goals, and 2 assists. Like we mentioned it earlier, kicking it into high gear to try to get to the 30-goal plateau for the first time in his career. He has goals in 3 straight games, including a multi-goal performance against the Florida Panthers. He was phenomenal, just shift in and shift out against the Panthers. One of the biggest reasons that the Penguins had a lead to blow in that one. He is now 4 goals away from the 30-goal mark with 9 games left in the season. I know I'm pulling for him, and the way that Crosby's just trucking along, it feels like Bryan Rust, as a result, is going to get to the 30-goal mark for the first time in his 11-year Penguins career. So that's my 3 stars of the week. If you're on YouTube, you can see it pulled up right now on the screen. Sergei Murashov, the young netminder, is number 3. Sidney Crosby comes in at number 2, and at number 1 is Bryan Rust with his 4 goals in the last 3 games played. But that's my 3 stars. Let me know in the comment section who yours are. But as of right now, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's move over a little bit, and let's answer all of your questions. If you're tuned in live, make sure that you drop your question in the comment section below. We'll try to get to as many as we can before we head out of here today. Let's kick it off with Aiden, who says, will getting pulled last night affect Jarry's confidence in play for the rest of the season? It shouldn't. I mean, there's always a chance that it does. Goaltending is fickle, and one bad performance can set a goaltender off for weeks. Now, you're hoping that Tristan Jarry, after what happened earlier in the season, has learned that, hey, one bad performance does not a career make. He needs to turn the page the way that I've turned the page. I talked about that game for 3 minutes today. Turn the page, move on to the next one, and try to regain your footing, because he wasn't just better since he came up. He was very good in that stretch since he came up. Last night was the first game where you looked at and you said, man, that kind of looked like the pre-sent down Tristan Jarry. But again, like I mentioned, the defense wasn't great in front of him. You can make the excuses all you want. He needs to turn the page. He needs to bounce back and look the way that he has looked coming into this game going forward. So does it affect his confidence? There's a chance that it does, but I'd have to imagine that the coaching staff and the entire team is hoping that he just wipes that one away the same way that they all should. Let's go to Flux CC, who says, what the heck happened to Joel Blomqvist? They sent him back down, and it was crickets for 2 weeks. Then they say he has a day-to-day injury, and now he hasn't been seen for a month. He is injured. He got injured shortly after he got sent down, but again, AHL injuries aren't always reported on very loudly. Let's just say that. If you follow guys like Tony Andrikaitis, if you follow guys like Nick Hart, you stay up to date on these things. You notice that, hey, he is injured, but it did come out of the blue. If you're following only the Pittsburgh Penguins writers and contingency of people that follow strictly the Penguins, the Rob Rossies aren't reporting on this. The Josh Yoes aren't reporting on this. The Matt Venzels take a little bit longer to report on this, but guys like Tony had it right away. That's what happened to him. He's injured. He's dealing with an injury. I don't know what the injury is, but he's dealing with one, and he hasn't played a lot of late. Hopefully he gets back, because the Penguins, they need him to get some more playing time. That was the whole purpose of sending him down, was to kind of get his feet back underneath him after he struggled at the NHL level. So, you know what, Matt, it was surprising when it was a little bit quiet the first week or so. And then when they said he had an injury, it was very surprising, because Not certain when it happened, not certain what happened to him, but as of right now, it is Murashov and Larson that are running the ship down in the AHL level, and we'll just have to keep our eyes out for any more updates for Blomqvist. I know last week he was up in Cranberry. He was with the Penguins in Pittsburgh, getting some work done, rehabbing there. So that's never a good sign whenever they send you back west to rehab an injury. So day to day feels like that was always a little bit underestimating what the injury was. Let's go to Evan, who says, haven't heard much about Novak since he was injured. What's the timeline for him, and where do you see him slotting in once he comes back? I know Tommy Novak returned to skating last week, but again, not very much by way of updates for him over the last calendar week. Now, that's partly because they're on a road trip. So whenever they get back home after that game on Thursday, we might get some better updates from the Penguins as far as where their injured players are at. But you'd have to imagine that he comes back at least in a week, because he'd have to get on the practice sheet of ice with the Penguins. I would imagine it's going to take at least a week if he's ready to go and ready to join the team at practice whenever they return to Pittsburgh. But I don't have a firm timeline because the Penguins haven't released a firm timeline. But as far as where he's going to slot in when he comes back, I'd imagine they'd put him at third line center, but at the same time, maybe you put him up with Malkin if Malkin is healthy again. He's day to day with an upper body injury, but I'd like to see a little bit more of those Gino and the Preds lines, right? Gino, Novak, and Phil Tomasino. I wouldn't mind seeing that line try to get a little bit of momentum going here in the last couple of weeks of the season. Let's go to Austin, who says, we all know the big three like Sully, but is he the right coach for these young guys coming in the next few years? Also, do you think Kirk McDonald comes to Pittsburgh in the coming years? I know everything that I've read and heard from the Penguins organization is that they absolutely love the way Kirk McDonald has handled the American Hockey League this year, that he is so much so in the good graces of the front office, which includes guys like Jason Spezza, who's the guy that has been singing his praises for the most part, but also Kyle Dubas and Amanda Kessel. It feels like, again, this is speculation, but it feels like whenever the plug is eventually pulled on Mike Sullivan, that he should be considered the leader in the clubhouse to be the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, as for when that is, I don't think there's a firm end date right now. I don't. I think Mike Sullivan is not going to go anywhere this summer. And I think going into next year, based on what the expectations are, he's going to be pretty safe early in the season. It's going to take a downfall that is similar to this year with a team that is expected to do way more than this year's team was for Mike Sullivan to get on the hot seat next year. Now, I'm not saying that there's no chance, because if the Penguins go out and they're busy in the offseason and they bring in a big name to go in the top six and they restructure their defense and their goaltending is firmed up a little bit, and all of a sudden they're a team that you can say, hey, they're probably fourth in the Metropolitan Division, might have a case to be third best team in the Metropolitan Division on paper going into this year, and they end up in 7th or 8th place going into Thanksgiving, then yeah, the heat's going to turn up on Mike Sullivan, but that's what it's going to have to take. It's going to have to take an excellent offseason from Kyle Dubas that raises the expectations of the organization going into 2025, and then he's going to have to completely fall short of those expectations early in the season. Because if the Penguins think going into the year, hey, this is a team that should make the playoffs, it's not a team that might make the playoffs. This is a team that should make the playoffs. And they're falling flat in what could be Evgeni Malkin's last year, what could be, Sidney Crosby's next best chance to get back into the playoffs since 2022. That's when the heat's going to start to turn up on Mike Sullivan. I don't think there's anything that suggests that he's going to be gone after this season. There's nothing that suggests that he's going to enter next season on the hot seat. It's going to have to turn up slowly throughout the first month or two. So as far as whether or not he's the right coach for these young guys, could be. We haven't seen Mike Sullivan with young players in quite some time. Part of that is because Penguins haven't had very many great young players to really use, but they're going to have them next year. Is it going to be a continuance of what we've seen, which is Mike Sullivan being a little bit trigger happy when it comes to pulling the young guys off the ice when they make a mistake? Or is it going to be 2016? Is it going to be 2017 whenever his guys came up? The Connor Sherrys, Tom Kuhnhackels. In 2016, it was also Bryan Rust. But in 2017, it was Jake Gensel. Those guys were given opportunities because they had earned Mike Sullivan's trust. If Kyle Dubas looks at Sullivan and says, hey, these guys earned my trust based on the way that they've played, and Sullivan can see that when he watches these games, when he watches Wilkes-Barre in the playoffs, if that is the way that he takes it and he looks like 16, 17 Sully again, then I think he could be the right coach for the job. But I do still think that there is the horror stories of what we've seen the last 3, 4, 5 seasons with young players, that if he does it with a more talented crop, that's when you're going to run into an issue, because he doesn't have the talent. Sam Poulin is not the prospect that Rakell McGroarty is. He never has been. Whom else am I looking at? Jonathan Gruden is not the prospect that Vasily Ponomarev is, and he never has been. So with these better prospects, you have to hope Mike Sullivan changes his philosophy on how quickly he pulls the trigger on some of these young guys. We've seen it with Kolyachonok this year. Pulled the trigger real quick at the end of that Islanders game. I'm not sure it was really necessary at that stage in time. So I don't know. Time will tell. We'll have to wait and see. Let's go back to Flux CC, who has more of a comment than an opinion or a question here. It says, Wilkes-Barre can clinch a playoff spot with a point tonight. Do you think management... Oh, here we go. There is a question there. Do you think a management will give anyone else from Wilkes-Barre a look in these final 9 games in Pittsburgh like they're doing now with Koppinen? I don't think you're going to see any of the names that you want to see. And that's the best way I can put it. I don't think you're going to see Ville Koivunen. I don't think you're going to see Tristan Bros. I don't think you're going to see Rutger McGroarty or Owen Pickering. I think those players, the Penguins have been pretty outspoken that they want them to stay at the AHL level this season. They want them to grow together, and they want them to build momentum into the Calder Cup playoffs. If you bring one of them up, it could stunt their... Well, the momentum is the word I was looking for. It could stunt their momentum. They could go back down. It could be a little lopsided and take some time to gain their footing. They want all of those guys to be able to be given opportunities to maintain the momentum that they've built all season into the playoffs, because Penguins really want Wilkes-Barre to go on an extended run and show them something here this spring. So I don't think any of those top names are going to come. Let me look at the Penguins Puckpedia. There might be 1 or 2 other names that come up, but also at the same time, you look at the Penguins roster right now, there's a lot of guys they're trying to gain information on. They're trying to figure out, once he comes back to being healthy, what Thomas Novak can be. They're trying to figure out what Connor Dewar can be. They're trying to figure out if Boko Imama is worth bringing back because he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. Same with Una Koppinen. He's still up here for a reason. Same with Emil Bemstrom. They have to make a decision on him. He's going to be an RFA. So the spots are limited at the NHL level right now to begin with, because there are a handful of players that they're trying to figure out what they are. Now, if I look at this AHL roster, maybe a Sam Poulin, give him an opportunity, because he has 1 year left on his deal, but he's fallen down the line so far. Maybe a guy like Valtteri Puustinen gets called up. They still, if I'm not mistaken, have all 4 of their call-ups, but those are the types of names that I would be looking at. Guys like Puustinen, guys like Poulin that you might have already seen before, but the Penguins are trying to kind of suss out where they stand in the organization when it comes to being able to make the jump to the NHL level. So, Matt, I don't think we're going to see anybody that we would like to see, because I would love to see Rutger McGroarty and what his game now looks like at the NHL level compared to what it looked like in the first 3 games of the season. But I think what we're going to see, if anything, would be a guy like Puustinen, would be a guy like Poulin. But again, I feel like that is less likely as we move along here. Let's see what Brandon has to ask. Says, do you believe it's time to move on from Erik Karlsson for how bad he has been all year? I'll push back a little bit. Say he hasn't been bad all year. There have been stretches where he has been excellent for the Penguins, and he was certainly excellent for Team Sweden at the Four Nations face-off. But with that being said, it is time to move on from Erik Karlsson. If you can, which I think they'll be able to, because with the salary cap going up and the Penguins probably being open to retaining a little bit of that salary, I think it's time for you to move on from Erik Karlsson, whatever you can get. And you might still be able to regain a first-round pick, which makes up for the only thing you really gave up in that trade in the first place. But I think more than likely, you're looking at a second-round pick and some prospects. You might get a first if the market maintains the way that it did throughout all of the trade deadline, but if the Penguins retain 2.5, that's not that big of a bite to take going into the next couple of seasons, especially with the salary cap going up and continuing to be expected to go up even more. I think you can get rid of them, and I think it is time. I think it was a worthwhile experiment, but I don't think that it worked, and I think it's time to move on and reshape your defense, because the defense has been so bad all year as far as playing their actual position and doing their actual job, which is defending your own end of the ice, that you're going to need to restructure it. And the easiest way to start that is to open up $7.5 million by retaining 2.5 and trading Erik Karlsson to open up that spot on the right side of the blue line. Let's see what FluxCC has to ask. Says, do you think we'll see anyone get ATOs to play in Wilkes-Barre playoffs now that the CHL regular season is over? I'm hoping to see Harrison Brunick. Brandon said right under it, Brunick is joining Wilkes-Barre in the next few days. So he's one that I would expect. Tanner Howe is on Calgary. If his season comes to an end early in the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised if he came over. But at the same time, you look at what Wilkes-Barre has right now, and it's a fairly completed lineup. I'm not sure how many more guys are going to come over. I believe, was it, trying to think of the name, but it was Chase Piatella is already there on an ATO. So I would imagine if you're going to get any more, you already have Piatella. You're probably going to have Brunick here at the end of the season. And I would imagine that Tanner Howe would be on that list if he gets eliminated early in the playoffs. Those are the three that I would look at. I'm not sure they'd bring in many more than that, considering how many players they want to get a good look at that have built up their way to get into the playoffs to this point. So I'm going to go with those three. Shout out to Brandon for keeping us honest with the Harrison Brunick. Says, do you think he can face the hands of management earlier than camp to trade out a vet or two to make room for him? Oh, force the hands, excuse me. Do you think he can force the hands of management earlier than camp? I mean, if he comes in and he plays the way that he did in camp last year and they go on a run and he's one of the biggest reasons, and it's him and Owen Pickering on a pairing, for example, they're just lighting up the Calder Cup playoffs. Yeah, I think the Penguins would look at that and be like, this kid is going to be playing professional hockey next year. If he performs that well, he'll be ready for pro hockey, and the Penguins will certainly leave the light on for him to make the roster out of camp, because he almost did last year, and he came in with the smallest chance humanly possible to make the roster, and yet he was either the last or the second to the last defenseman that was sent back. If he has a really good Calder Cup playoffs, there is no reason that the Penguins wouldn't sit there less than 7 months later and say, yeah, we need to make sure that there is a clear path for this kid, if he continues to perform, to potentially make the opening night roster in 2025. Let's go down to Evan, who says, do you think Valtteri Puustinen could get a call-up before the end of the season? I think you probably put this in here before I answer that last question, but I'll still look at it here. He's been pretty quiet around him, but he's played well in the AHL. He hasn't been bad, but the problem is, same with Sam Poulin, he's been surpassed. There have been other prospects that have come in and then have jumped him. But the question is if they're not ready, are the Penguins going to trust Valtteri Puustinen going into next season? If I'm not mistaken, he signed a 2-year contract whenever he re-signed last year. So he has one more year at $775,000 to go. He's a guy that played 50-plus games last year and looked good too. Like, there's a reason he played the 50-plus, and that is because he continued to earn his opportunity at the NHL level. He came in, he didn't have a great camp. He's been given a couple opportunities. I think he has 10 NHL games this year, and he did not look the way that he looked last year, but he's just been surpassed at the AHL level by guys like Rutger McGroarty, guys like Ville Koivunen, guys like Vasily Ponomarev, guys like Tristan Brose. They're just all ahead of him in the pecking order now, and the question is, what is the circumstance that's going to give him the opportunity over those other guys? One of them is if there's injuries at the NHL level at the end of the season, because he'll be one of the names that they would call up and say, hey, show us what you got, because it's not going to change very much when it comes to the top 6 of Wilkes-Barre. It's not going to change very much when it comes to the momentum of that team. If Puustinen comes up and gets a couple of games, at least it's not going to change it as much as if you bring one of those bigger names up, one of those higher tiered prospects up that are playing more minutes per night. So I could see Puustinen being one of those guys, like I mentioned earlier. Him and Poulin are the two that I'm keeping my eye on if the Penguins need to dip into the farm system here in the last 9 games played. But it has been a quiet season, a year in which we expected Valtteri Puustinen to really establish himself at the NHL level, and he's barely gotten to double digits this year, and he doesn't have any points in the games that he has played. So it's a down year for him, but as we always say, development is not linear. So I would be hesitant to bury this kid before we see how he responds over the summer, into camp next fall, and into the season in 2025-26. Let's go to Blues Nation, who says, not about a specific prospect, but do you think whoever we get in our 5th to 10th pick will immediately become our best prospect? I don't. I think they will immediately become a top 5, but I think as of right now, McGroarty is going to be hard to supplant. He is your number 1 prospect through and through, no questions asked. Whoever comes in, if it's 5th through 10th, I think as of right now would slot in either 3rd or 4th, depending on who you ask. Because right now, I have Rutger McGroarty at number 1, and nobody in that 5 to 10 range right now I would put over him if the Penguins landed here in a couple months. I would put Sergei Murashov at number 2 already. He has skyrocketed. The question coming into this year was, how is he going to adapt to the North American style of play? How is he going to adapt to coming over and playing pro hockey in North America? The answer to that question was very easily, very quickly, and very effectively. Because of that, and because of the ceiling that this kid has at a very young age, I put him at number 2 right now. It might be overreacting, but I put him at number 2, and I would put him ahead of whoever the Penguins get in the top 10, top 5 to 10. If they get somebody in the top 5, it's a different conversation. At number 3, the case would be between whoever is at 5th to 10th and Ville Koivunen. And then Harrison Brunick is right after that. That's the way I see it, and that's where I would put whoever comes in between 5th and 10th. Let's go down to Brandon, who has a comment here of, I think Koivunen does everything Puustinen does, but better, and Ville has an edge to his game that Valtteri just doesn't have. That is the big thing with Puustinen, and that is why he has become kind of the poster child for what everybody complains about Mike Sullivan for, because Puustinen has terrific underlying numbers when he plays at the NHL level. Last year, he was able to put up some pretty good counting stats as well. He had over 20 points in his 50 games played, and that was in a bottom 6 that was pretty anemic when it came to the offensive side of the ice. The one thing that he wasn't utilizing in the NHL level was his goal scoring and his shot. Now, part of that was he didn't get the opportunities. He wasn't set up enough. When he was, he did unleash it from time to time, and you saw glimpses of, hey, that's what his shot can be at the NHL level. If he could just put it all together, he has the shot. He just didn't do it enough. Koivunen, we haven't seen at the NHL level, but if he can do that, if he can unleash his shot and find ways to unleash his shot at the NHL level, he is going to be a better version of Puustinen. I think the ceiling as of right now is higher, and I wouldn't disagree, Brandon, that right now it feels like Koivunen is Valtteri Puustinen leveled up, per se. But I think that, again, Puustinen does need to get that edge because he's not going to be a top 6 guy. That's what we've learned, is that he's not going to be a top 6 guy at the NHL level. He needs to learn how to play that grit and grind, 3rd line grinder, 4th line doesn't seem like it would fit him. And that's the problem, because right now, all these guys that have passed him are going to be higher in the lineup than him. So he has to learn how to play those 3rd, 4th line minutes. That's what Vasily Ponomarev has been doing all season long. That's what Sam Poulin has been transitioning to doing all season long. You notice he is no longer a top 6 forward for Wilkes-Barre because he's never going to be a top 6 forward at the NHL level for this organization. So he's trying to acclimate himself to being a bottom 6 guy, to playing that type of role. Ponomarev has had some similar discussions and had some similar I would say discussions about what he is and what he can be and what he should be doing at the AHL level. So I think that's what Puustinen needs to do. He needs to realize, and I think he has, but he needs to acclimate himself to playing more so from that bottom 6 role. Let's go to Dapton, who says, saw Sam Poulin was the number 1 star again at the AHL level. I think maybe he's on an upswing in his play. Let's see if he can keep that momentum. Yeah, he's had a couple of good games over the past week. If he can continue to do that like he did last year, he might earn himself an opportunity. Or at the very least, he might position himself well going into the summer. That's what's important here, not just at the AHL level, but at the NHL level. Who can finish the season with their arrow pointed upwards? Who can leave that impression this year as everybody goes to take their break? Everybody goes to go on vacation. Everybody goes to get to the lake, to go wakeboarding, to do whatever NHLers do, play golf, whatever hockey players do in the offseason. Who can leave the lasting impression? So when they come back for whether it be rookie camp in the summer, whether it be the Prospects Challenge late in the summer, whether it be training camp, when they come in, the organization says, well, late last season, they were pretty good. Don't forget how big of an impact it was that Michael Bunting had played so well in the last 20 games of the season that a lot of people were saying, hey, in a full year, no doubt he's a top sixer. The offense didn't follow. But you thought that, and you had the belief that he could do that because of how he ended last season. That's what we're going to look at the NHL level and at the AHL level over the next couple of weeks. Let's go to Brandon, who says, what do you think of the third line next season? Rutger, Koivunen, and Ville. Too young. Too young. That's a lot of inexperience, a lot of guys that have not faced NHL talent other than, I think you meant not Koivunen and Ville, but Koivunen and Ponomarev. But that's a lot of inexperience, a lot of lessons learned by one line. I wouldn't dislike seeing all of them getting an opportunity next year, but I don't think that would be the third line. Yesterday, we had a listener send in a question that had a top six of, let me see if I can remember this on the fly, a top six of, and it was a crazy scenario, but it was Mitch Marner coming to the Penguins with Crosby and Rakell as the top line. You then had Tomasino, Malkin, and I think Peterka was the other name that they brought in for the second line. Then you look at your third line, and you could have McGroarty, you could have Tommy Novak, and you could have Connor Dewar. I think that is a good third line to kick things off for Rutger McGroarty. Now, the fourth line, you have to figure out. But if Koivunen and McGroarty are in a spot, then you could put them on either side of Tommy Novak and have that be your third line. There's a lot of ways that you could go about it. You could have Kevin Hayes there to be the facilitator and to be just that steadying force in the middle of that line. You could do a lot of things, but I don't think putting three rookies on the same line is going to be conducive to doing them any good early on in that season. But that is, let's go to Brandon. Last one here. Actually, I got two because we got another funny one here from Christopher. Brandon says Poulin would be nasty on the Penguins' fourth line. He has been so good on the penalty kill this year. That's what he needs to do. That's what he needs to do. That's what he's been learning to do this year. That's what this year was for Sam Poulin. He came up early in the season, got his 3 games or 4 games or whatever it ended up being, and it just simply looked like he needed to go back down, transform himself into a fourth liner, third liner, and then try to build himself back up. He's went down, he's done the work, and now he's taken Jonathan Gruden's spot. That's why Gruden was sent out, because Poulin feels like he's more in line to be that fourth line grinder for the Penguins going forward. Whenever he gets the opportunity, that's when we're going to actually get to see whether or not it worked. It works at the AHL level, and Sam Poulin is a great AHL player, but that jump from AHL to NHL has been tough for him. We'll have to wait and see if he's able to make it in this newfound role of a fourth line grinder. Last thing we'll say today, Christopher Hart says McGroarty needs to be better at skating, or McGroarty better be skating. Yeah, that's always the bugaboo with Rutger McGroarty. His skating has been his Achilles heel throughout his entire development. Since he was in United States National Development Program, that's what everybody pointed as why Rutger McGroarty gets any demerits on his report card, is because of his skating. I think it's looked better as the season has gone on. I think that, as well as everything else in his game, has improved as the year has gone on. It's not going to automatically be great. He's not going to come out of nowhere and be the best skater we've ever seen, but it has steadily gotten better. And I think that is what you have to hang your hat on and hope that he can continue to do that as his development continues. Because even if he does make the NHL level next year, doesn't mean his development's done. It just means that he's ready to make the jump, and now he has to continue his development at the NHL level. Now, the other thing that Christopher said is he needs to take boxing lessons. He needs to not fight. And Brandon even said the same thing right underneath. Says McGroarty doesn't need to drop the gloves with anybody. Just play his hard-nosed style and let others take penalties trying to fight him. Yeah, he needs to go out there and be a more talented Michael Bunting. How many times did Michael Bunting actually drop the gloves and fight somebody his entire career, not just in Pittsburgh? That is the style that Rucker McGroarty can emulate from. Now, hopefully he has more, he has higher upside than Michael Bunting, but you're hoping that he puts it together to where he is a more offensively inclined Michael Bunting. That's what you want out of Rucker McGroarty. You don't want him to be getting into fights, especially considering right now he's the best prospect you got, highest level, highest quality, and you don't want him missing time for 5 minutes in a game or even longer if he fights the way that he did in his first career fight. But that's going to do it for this episode of Tip of the Ice-Burgh Live. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe if you liked our content, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.